Hello, everyone. I'm Don Pratt, host of a show here on Rogers TV where we give you a perspective of policing your community. Welcome to Policing York Region. We're going to shoot straight over to a video. I need to caution, it's a bit of a graphic video, and it's something that was put together with some organizers right here in York Region, and we're going to come back and chat to them right after the video.
One's still stuck inside, 3 by the tree here. He's the driver right here.
The car it just stopped, and then
okay.
I couldn't stop in time.
Okay.
Matthew? Okay, so you can see this is a really bad situation here. Matthew, I believe that you are impaired by drug right now. I'd like to do a test on you to determine what, if any, drugs you have in your system. Do you understand that? Okay, so what I need you to do, Matthew, is I need you to look at my pen. Okay? I'm going to move it from side to side. I want you to follow it with just your eyes, not your head. Okay, do you understand that? Not your head, Matthew. Just your eyes, please. Okay? Focus on this. Okay, Matthew, I've determined that you are impaired by drug right now. Okay, we're going to be taking you back to the station. You're under arrest for impaired operation of a motor vehicle.
11:20, 11:30, be advised.
And also impaired operation caused bodily harm. Do you understand that? Okay, these officers are going to handcuff you with your hands behind your back. PS 11-1 in custody for impaired cause death ×2 and impaired cause bodily harm.
Welcome back, everyone. And that was a mock collision that was staged by an outfit called Party. And I'm going to let Sarah Thorne tell me what Party was. And Brad McMillan, thanks also for being on the show. But Sarah, the acronym Party?
It stands for Prevent Alcohol and Risk-Related Trauma in Youth. It was an initiative that started at Sunnybrook in 1985 when they were observing lots of people coming through the emerge with what they deemed at the time to be preventable injuries. I was part of that program in Ottawa when I worked there at the Ottawa Hospital. And when I started to work at Southlake in 2008, I thought this was something that our community and our facility really could use.
Okay. Yeah. No, and it's... This was taped earlier this spring in May. We at Rogers got the invite, and thank you very much for that.
Thank you for joining us.
It was an incredible scene to be at. Brad, you've been there for a number of these. You've seen these roll out. Are they all as realistic as this was?
They pretty much are. We try to take the theatrical part out of these scenarios and make it realistic, from what the police do when they show up on scene, the paramedics, the firefighters. All of us do exactly what we would in a real life situation. And a lot of questions, a lot of things come up from the young people and create nice discussion out of it.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. I mean, we played a few different elements on day of where, you know, obviously we were the news crew that came out, and we had cameras getting in there to see what was going on, and that's real time. That is something that would happen at a scene. We also had a part that, of course, you don't see on the screen, and that's the staging area where we have all of your guests, all of the youth that you're trying to educate, and that's where I was. And watching the emotion. And nobody in that audience can deny that everyone felt it. What was happening? You actually got lost for a bit on whoa, no, this isn't real. This isn't real, because every part of it, and the ending, wow. And unfortunately, that's what you see, isn't it?
It really is. From the minor injuries right up to the severe injuries. A poor decision can result in a collision like this that happens, and we just want people to understand that not everyone is going to come out of a situation like this. To go to the hospital and end up seeing Sarah at work afterwards, like two of the people there ended up being deceased on scene. One was obviously dead, and then one we ended up doing a pronouncement on. That is the reality of what happens out there.
Yeah.
And certainly the trauma that we witnessed and the video that you put together is really the culmination of some education that we do for the whole day.
Yes.
The fatalities are really traumatic, but I think the other message that we try to hit home for the students and for our community is that the fatalities are tragic, but sometimes living with the consequences and they go on for life, right? So part of that day is really looking at some of the rehab that you might get at Southlake, some of the emergency and ICU services that we might provide there, and the trauma that's related to those as well beyond the day of.
Yeah. And you can maybe you can walk us through that, because I mean we've captured the highlight of the day, which was the mock collision. But there's more to that day than the collision. You have other settings. You want to talk a little bit about that?
So we try to mirror a little bit the path that an injury survivor would take from the time that they're injured right through the whole phase of being in the emergency department, going through the critical care setting, and then the rehab phase, which can be lifelong. We talk about that part that happens in the hospital that we do at Southlake, but also that part that involves you getting back to real life and maybe being able to go back to work or not. And we've talked a little bit about the emotional impact as well on the survivors and their families and kind of everybody who witnesses that day.
And I wasn't actually part of the classroom scene that you hosted, but we were speaking to some of the students afterwards, and they were quite visibly shaken by some of the education that they're receiving. But it's so paramount that they receive it.
And I think they come into that day not knowing what to expect, and really leave with an eye-opening awareness of the impact that their choices can have on not only the rest of their lives, but the rest of somebody else's life as well. And
we have some interviews from some of the students of that day that we'll show at another time. I'm not sure that we're going to fit it into this show, but exactly that. They, in fact, the one young lad even said, this isn't what I thought I was coming into. In fact, I think his wording was, I thought this was going to be a bit lame. And he was almost tearful. He says, by no means is this lame.
It is, and just the reality of it to show people what actually happens as opposed to what they see on television and in the movies. And in the medical field, we know that isn't even close to the reality of it. And having some of those quiet times before the responders arrive and seeing that people are actually suffering and everyone's in a state of confusion of what do I do, what can I do?
It's almost like chaos until somebody reins it in, right? With that, sit right here, and folks, that ends this section of Policing York Region. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. Now we're sitting with Brad McMillan from York Region Paramedic Services and Phil Mapley from York Regional Police Traffic Unit. Thanks again for being on the show. As we were talking earlier in the earlier segment, it was a very powerful day. It was. I personally had never seen anything like that. So well rehearsed, so well done. Unfortunately, some of us have had an opportunity to see real-time accidents, and you hit it spot on. So you've both been involved in this for some time, Phil?
Yeah, I think for me it's 4 years, roughly. So I had the privilege of starting about 4 years ago with Sarah, and before Brad it was Jordan. So Brad was introduced after me. So we've worked very well together as a group, and it's been very dynamic.
No, as a day of, it was like a well-oiled machine, right? Like it was very well put together, and learning afterwards. I'm not a first responder, so I don't get out and see these things, fortunately, as often as you guys do. But putting it together, you wanted to capture all of the elements of what happens at an accident and the results, right?
It is, and as society, we always call them accidents. And
yeah, I'm sorry. No, you've corrected me on that a few times, and you're absolutely right.
And that's just it sounds like a simple term, but an accident is something that is not preventable.
Yeah, it was beyond
all
your
of
own
this stuff
control.
is preventable,
Yes.
and that's actually really great to get into that, because all these actions that cause these type of collisions, they are all preventable.
Yes.
In the situation that happened with this scenario, a young man decided that he would drive better after having a joint. He'd be more relaxed with the marijuana in his system, and because of that, it showed in real time that his reaction time was very slow to react, which ended up with multiple people dead on scene, people transported to trauma hospitals, and people with lifelong scars.
And Phil, I guess that's one of your paramount roles in the traffic services.
Yeah, it's to educate, and I think there's a big misconception that if you smoke a couple of joints that you can drive more comfortable, and unfortunately that's not the case.
No.
And if you mix alcohol with that, it's even...
No, and that conversation has come to light obviously a lot more recently with all the talk of cannabis, and we hear it all too often, and especially after discussions about this show, is just exactly that. No, it relaxes me. That video is testament to it does not relax you.
Not at all. And the thing with this video, that's if I could point one thing out, really, this wasn't rehearsed before tape. This was just. This is how a scene would actually play out with no, we don't have time to rehearse on the real thing. No. And this is done that same way. And that's how well all the people there work well in emergency service together without...
And that's a good point to bring into it, is all of the services working uniformly alongside one another. You know in your role when to step back, you know in your role when to step in. And that was very clear. That everyone has defined roles, and I guess that's just through your years of training, right?
Yeah, I think it
is, and the way that it worked out is it's about the kids that were involved with the scenario. We really wanted the focus to be on them, and also for the young the teenagers that were watching the event. And it goes a lot more beyond just with the cannabis changes coming up. We still see impaired by substances, and it could be everything from prescription drugs, which Phil and I talk quite a bit about, alcohol, recreational drugs. All of that stuff needs to stay separate from operating a motor vehicle.
No, absolutely.
Have the playtime, but when you're driving, you have one obligation, and that's to be a responsible driver.
And you were talking about the effects and how it made people feel. We actually did capture some interviews with some of the students that were participating that day, and I think we're going to flip over to those right now, just to get a bit of a feedback from how they felt about today.
It's very important to be safe and to make your own decisions. And also a big influence now in my age and time is peer pressure is a lot.
At first I thought it would just be something kind of lame at first, but it's really serious.
It's just this thing that feels really real. I know it's not real, but it still feels real, and it's just you're going through all the emotions of seeing everything that's happened.
I was pretty nervous when I saw the kids coming out. My heart started racing a bit, and then once the siren started going and everything, and I had to scream and really start to feel it, I think I almost started to cry at one point just because it was so real.
When I got out of the truck and I was looking at the girl in the back of the car and she was screaming at me, it just didn't like it. There's nothing compared to that before. I've never felt anything like it.
It's unbelievable that something like this could happen in her life.
When I was in grade 10, I went to this program. My mom made me come, and I hope it kind of makes them think twice about their actions. It's the little things that can destroy a life, right? Like, you just got to take the moment, step back, and really think about it before you make those mistakes.
Everyone who helped here today and made this happen has left, I think, a big impact on all kids who came here and had the experience to come and watch all this.
Well, I just started driving, and recently, I kind of got lazy with it and started, doing one-handed stuff. But now, I look at it, I want to tell my friends, take more care when you're driving, because it's really serious.
And hopefully we can educate people on the consequences of either what they haven't done or what they've been doing and lucky to this point.
Those are some great interviews, and worthy to note that every one of the people that we were talking to were part of that day. I wanted to make reference to the one young lady who was actually pinned between the larger vehicle and the car, Calandra. Amazing job that she did, but we did speak to her after, and her emotions were just beyond. And one of the other ones in there was referring to peer pressure. That's a big thing. Right?
It's too big, and unfortunately nobody thinks of the aftermath of it. They don't look beyond, and we try to educate these kids when we do speak to them to say, today you might do this, but what is the aftermath?
That's right.
How is it going to affect you?
That's right.
How does it affect others?
And this is something that we're actually likely going to do a follow-up show, and it'll be a show all on its own, is the aftermath. We've done what happens. This is what happens as a result. But we haven't followed through to see what happens to each individual family, each individual person that was there. Right from a bystander to the young girl that was in the back that lost her life, and her family, what they have to live through now. And this is something that it's all too real.
It really is, and we know just last year alone there was upwards of 20 people under the age of 24 that didn't leave the scene. So when we say that we pronounce it, there's one of two categories. They're obviously dead, meaning the injuries are that severe, that horrific, that we don't even do anything. Then there's the other steps where we do try to do everything. We essentially do what they do in the emergency room, but at some point it's futile.
At some point it's determined that this is not going any further.
And so we know of 20 that's happened to just so far in 2018. And out of those, when we looked at the statistics, the 85% of those under the age of 24 that die, there's 85% of them, 95% of that is related to motor vehicle collisions.
Wow. That's some scary statistics.
And it really hasn't changed since, I think, going back into the 80s. So we've got safety things in the vehicles, but we're still making, as Phil alludes to all the time, poor choices.
And I think like the whole idea of this program that's been created, that started in Sunnybrook, that Sarah brought up to Newmarket, to South Lake, there's a purpose behind it, right? And it's all about trying to be preventable, try to educate these kids at this age so that they don't go into their adulthood making poor choices. So we're hoping that the message gets through to them through how we educate, obviously through this mock and the different things that we do. Right. And nobody wants to make that call, or for me to have to bang on that door at 3 in the morning and say, you know, so-and-so's not coming home tonight.
Yes.
And it's not a great place to have to be for anybody that's involved.
No, and when we talk about the, you know, earlier I was talking about the effects that it has on other people. You know, that could be the families of somebody that's injured or worse, killed. It could be, you know, even the driver. I mean, he's a victim, unfortunately, of his own demise, right? Like, he was a victim of his own circumstances. But his family still has to go through life knowing that, you know, my boy killed somebody as a result of his tragic.
You're right, and it's funny because when we do these presentations, that question is asked to these students. How would you like to wake up every morning looking in a mirror and going, how is the day going to go knowing that I killed that person? And to have to live with that.
Yeah, some of the students came out of those classrooms and they were very emotional because they had gone through those exercises with you and your teams. Just that, they were put in the position of, what if that was me? I can assure you that from that event, you're going to have, you know, we always talk about teach our kids because they teach us, and they're the best filters to get information out into your society. Yeah. I can assure you that from that incident alone, you've got a lot of information that's going to get fed back to families.
There is, and we do want to keep engaging the parents too. Even though the program that Sarah has developed at South Lake is focused on the youth, there is some that come back to the families, and it's like, oh my, we wouldn't believe what we went through today. And even though the mock is an amazing day, it's what happens throughout the course of the year that really has an impact on a lot more students with running the program. Because we're in uniform, our presentation, that it seems kind of blingy, but the reality is the rest of the stuff that happens behind the scenes with the occupational therapists, the physiotherapists, the surgeons, rehab, and all that stuff, that's where a lot of them do have a big eye-opener. That's like, wow.
Well, and that's why I think that it would be good to do a follow-up to this, because like I say, we've kind of ended with, you know, at the end of the scene, they're just beginning cleanup, but life continues, and unfortunately in that case, 2 of them don't.
Well, it becomes life-altering, right? Like it's if you think of, you know, if someone passes away at a crash, that's the end. But for some of these people that survive with injuries, they're never the same.
No, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, right? You could have somebody that's, you know, totally disabled or you know, not able to function in another manner. Now their families are dealing with that too, and you know, something to touch on as well is it's not just the people that are involved in the scenes. It's you first responders that go, that you do have to deal with this stuff and then still go home to your nice, quiet little families and pretend that your day was just perfect. And obviously it wasn't.
Yeah, it makes it difficult at times, for sure.
Right, and it does, I'm sure, in many capacities, right?
It is. We do see these calls. Thankfully, though, it accounts for a very small percentage of the calls when we look at it globally. Yeah. As long as we just keep focusing on getting the message out that make better choices. The better your choice,
better the result.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, we are, you know, actions, reactions, right? Like we are the author of what the reaction's going to be if we create the scenario.
Well, you throw the question out, is it preventable?
Yes.
How can we change that mindset?
And that's a big one. Like, is it preventable? Absolutely. You know, we see those messages out there, don't drink, don't drive. No drugs, no driving. Hopefully, with episodes like this, we're helping to further that message. Right? That's all we can hope for.
Right.
We all do the very best that we can. On that, thank you so much for being on here and sharing that information.
Thank you.
Folks, that wraps up this episode of Policing York Region. For more information on the show, rogerstv.com. For more information on York Regional Police, yrp.ca. Been great having you. I look forward to seeing you again.